Right, thanks everyone for joining us. Today we're going to be joined by Carla Langley, who is going to be helping us with building relationships with financial planners. We know that takes time to develop and is a key part of the Paraplanner role, and it's a bit that no one warned you about. So we hope to help you to develop the confidence that you need to build those relationships and provide you with a foundation for a successful paraplanning career. So thanks to Carla for joining us. She's here to share her experience and also some practical ways for us to improve those and to support us all. As I'm sure Carla will mention, it'd be great if you could get on video. It's all about putting yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit and joining in. So if you could do that, that'd be fabulous. We are recording the session and we will be sharing that at a later date on our YouTube channel. For those that can't join us today, but we're going to pass over to Carla any second now, and she's going to give us her knowledge on this area to help us improve. Thank you, Carla. Take it away.
Hey, thank you, Sian. Yeah, well, you took it off me actually. I was going to say, if your videos are working, it'd be really great actually if people pop them on, if you don't mind. The main reason I normally ask that as well is I find it really strange presenting to a blank screen. It's really hard to do. I prefer seeing people. So if you are there, it will be really nice to see people. And I am just about to share my screen, so I'll just share my slides, Sian. So just bear with me a second. Let me pop them up. If you let me know when they pop up. Are they there? Yep, lovely. See people nodding. Great, lovely. Okay, so today all about building confidence and relationships, and particularly in the role of paraplanning. Now, I completely understand there are a few people who are going to join today who might not yet be in that role of paraplanning, but I think it'll be a really good session to actually just understand, I suppose, the side of it that we don't really talk about, and just understand some of the skills I think that you need as a paraplanner, and maybe how you can start to build those. So let's have just a quick look at the agenda and what we're going to be talking about today. So in terms of what we're going to be going through and looking at, I think we'll start off with just what is confidence. So let's be really clear on what we mean when we talk about confidence. And then let's just talk about what isn't confidence as well, because I think that's really important to understand. And then I want us to just start to move into actually why confidence is so important. And then think about things like public speaking or speaking up in groups. And actually, is that a lack of confidence or is it something else? And how do we do that better? And then the real key bit that I want us to get to is actually just thinking about confidence and relationships and what that means in the role of paraplanning, challenging in a positive way, which you might have to do as a paraplanner. And then at the end, I just want us to have a bit of a discussion around ideas of how you might challenge a planner if you're a paraplanner. So we'll get to that bit at the end and we'll share some ideas. So I think let's start first with just what is confidence, because I think that's a really important, I suppose, a really important bit to define, because I think we're probably guilty of confusing confidence with things like social extroversion or someone being gregarious, when in reality, when we're talking about confidence, it's not about being a social butterfly or being socially confident or really happy to get up and speak in front of people. Really what we're talking about is that self-confidence and that belief in yourself. So I've just popped on the screen there just the actual definition of confidence, which is actually all around being clear-headed and sure in what you believe or what you know about, and knowing that actually something is right or it's the most effective way to do something. And it's that actually it's about having that trust in yourself. So when we're talking about confidence, we're not talking about being extroverted. What we're talking about is actually believing in your own ability. That's actually what confidence is. So it's interesting when you put it into that perspective, because when you start to think about confidence in that way and you go, okay, it's about believing in my own ability, you start to realize that actually confidence is, I suppose you can say, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Insofar as that actually if you don't have confidence, you probably don't believe in yourself, therefore you'll probably never try something, and you'll fail because you didn't try. So actually what you might find is some of the people who do really well is not because they've necessarily got an innate ability to do something, but it's just because they were confident enough to try. And I think that's really important just to keep in the back of your mind as we go through to this session and talking about confidence. Is actually it's about that self-belief and actually having the confidence to actually stand up and try to do something. So on that note, I think this is really important to, I suppose, just highlight on the whole subject of confidence and what is confidence, which is you're not born with confidence. Anyone can develop confidence. You are not born naturally confident. And I think it's quite interesting because I do loads of speaking and stuff like this. And I think people just assume that I'm just naturally confident. And actually, I was telling Sean and Chloe that I'm not. I used to be really quite shy and I hated doing public speaking and I hated doing all this kind of stuff. But one day, and this is a true story actually, one day I used to work somewhere about 7 or 8 years ago and I'd had to stand up and do a presentation to about 100 people and I was just dying inside. It was awful. But afterwards, someone said to me, "Oh my God, you're so confident. How does that not scare you?" And I just thought, oh my God, do people not know how terrified I am inside? And actually, suddenly when you realise that people think you're quite good at this, even though you're terrified inside, it just changes your mindset a little bit and you start to go, oh, okay. Actually, I feel a bit more comfortable because I might be dying inside, but no one can see, no one realizes. So then you don't mind doing it again because you think, right, okay, I can get used to this. And I think that's really important to just remember is that you're not born with confidence and there are things you can do to actually start to build your confidence and actually build your self-belief and to get to that place where you are comfortable maybe doing things that you're not comfortable doing right now. So on that note, I think, let me just move my slide on. Let's talk about what isn't confidence. And this is really important because I think this is the bit where we often confuse a lot of traits in people with confidence and it just isn't. So firstly, this is a really big area that gets confused with confidence, extroversion. So actually we typically think that someone who's extroverted, so loud, sociable, life and soul of the party, we just call them confident. We say they're very confident people. And actually they're not, they're extroverts. And that's completely different to being confident. And actually, I know some fantastic introverts who are very confident people. So whether you're introverted or you're extroverted doesn't define whether you're a confident person or not. Because it comes back, doesn't it, to that point that confidence is about self-belief. And in particular at the moment, I work with someone who's very introverted, but he's so confident. And when I say he's so confident, he's really quietly confident. So when he does speak and he talks about what he knows about, it just comes through that he knows his stuff. And you can just feel that confidence. So regardless of the fact that he's usually quite quiet, he doesn't always speak up, you can just feel that confidence when he does speak up. And I think that's really important to understand is when we talk about confidence, it's not about being loud and the life and soul of the party. It's actually just having that self-belief. And then the other thing that sometimes we confuse with confidence is arrogance. And that's probably an easier one to separate out from confidence, actually. But it's that arrogance is actually someone who's maybe got unmerited confidence or self-belief when they probably shouldn't. So regardless of whether they are or aren't capable, they just think they are. And that's arrogance, that's not confidence. And I think as well, presumptuousness. So people who are just presumptuous and just, believe in something themselves or someone succeeding without even having any regard for failure or anything around it. Again, that's not confidence either. And it's quite interesting because when you start to look at those three examples and then you start to think of people who who maybe you thought was really confident, you go, actually, no, I don't think they are confident. They're just a bit arrogant or they're just extroverts. But it's about being really clear what is confidence and what isn't confidence. So another thing that I think is probably worth pointing out as well in terms of what isn't confidence is actually this whole idea of being able to do public speaking. So a lot of people, there's not that many people actually who are quite comfortable to get up and talk in groups or to talk in front of, you know, big groups of people, maybe 100 or so. But actually, again, being able to do that or not wanting to do that isn't confidence or a lack of confidence. It's actually communication apprehension, which is a phobia. And I think that's really important to understand, is being afraid to maybe speak up in a group setting or doing public speaking is a phobia. It's not a lack of confidence. So don't feel like if that's you and you hate getting up in a group or you hate getting up to do public speaking, that it means you're not confident, because it doesn't. It just means you're suffering from an irrational fear of communication apprehension. And the reason it's important to understand that is because if we know that actually it's just an irrational fear, well, we can deal with it. It's just a phobia and you can fix it. And I think that's really important to get in your mind as well, is that actually you can be scared of public speaking but still confident. So big thing to take away: if you're scared of public speaking, scared of speaking up in groups, it makes you feel a bit nervous inside, that's fine. It's just a phobia. And actually, we can deal with that. So let's think about, actually, if you do feel a little bit scared of maybe public speaking or speaking up in groups or putting your views across, you can use your mind to overcome that. It's like any phobia. So firstly, I would always say, learn your subject matter. So if you're really confident about what it is you're going to talk about or you're going to raise a point about, you're one step ahead already, because you've got that self-belief and that confidence that, right, I know what I'm talking about. And then, and Sian and Chloe and I were talking about this, actually just expose yourself to those kind of situations. That's the only way you're ever going to get over that almost dread of speaking up, is to just do it. You just have to do it. And the more you do it, the more desensitized you come to that situation. And again, I use myself as an example, because I said I used to hate doing stuff like this, and now I quite like it. Well, Sian will tell you I love doing stuff like this now, but it's just, she's nodding, but it's just because you end up doing so much of it and you do it all the time that suddenly it's run of the mill. So it's almost just that exposure of going, right, I just need to bite the bullet, just do it. And the more you do it, the easier it gets, the easier it feels to actually just be confident enough to speak up. And even if it's not public speaking in big groups, even just in small groups, whether it be team meetings, etc., the more you expose yourself to just speaking up and having a voice, the more actually it just becomes normal. Okay, so yeah, I think a message there is you can think your way out of that uncomfortable feeling, expose yourself, desensitize yourself to it, and you will get more confident in being able to do that. Okay, so let's move on to the good bit then, which is, why is all this so important, particularly if you're a paraplanner as well, or you're looking to move into paraplanning? Well, firstly, we've said confidence is all about this feeling and having a belief that you're capable of doing something and you're capable of being successful. So therefore, in the role of particularly a paraplanner, it actually becomes really important when we're talking about relationship building, when we're talking about maybe group speaking or speaking up in meetings. It becomes really, really important that you've got that self-belief and you can do that. So let's talk a bit more about actually why it's important and why it's important in that role. Well, firstly, when you're confident in what you do and you've got that self-belief, and the example I talked about earlier about one of the guys who I work with at the moment, when you can feel that confidence coming from someone, it's really infectious. And actually you then become confident in that person. So when you've got this quiet self-belief and you know you're right and you know what you're talking about, it really shines through when you talk to other people. And I think if you can show other people that you're confident, particularly in your own technical ability, if you're a paraplanner, then they just start to mirror that belief and they start to go, right, okay. So Sian, for example, you know, a planner Sian might work with will go, oh, yeah, she's good, she knows her stuff actually. That's because you've got that quiet confidence in yourself. And I think the flip side of that is a lack of self-confidence in your ability often leads to people questioning your ability. So even if you are perfectly capable, you've passed all your exams and you've got all that technical knowledge, if you've got that self-doubt, it shines through the same way as confidence does. And then people start to question you and go, okay, do they really know what they're talking about? So I think that's why the whole bit about confidence, particularly as a paraplanner, is really important, because it is infectious to other people.
Carla, a really good example of that lack of self-confidence is where someone says, oh, I think this might be the case, or I think this, or I think the answer is. Whereas if you say the answer is, or I know the answer is, then you are coming across a lot more confident, and they are much more believable, and people will trust what you're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a really key word there, actually, Sian, trusting what you're saying. And I think that's a big thing, isn't it? That when you are confident in what you do and what you're delivering, then it shines through, but then you build that trust. And actually who you're working with, people start to trust you and they go, right, okay, she does know her stuff. I can trust what she's doing. I think that's a really good point. So I think in terms of, so we talked about why confidence is important. Let's just talk a bit about confidence and relationships and linking those two things together a little bit more. So I think in terms of confidence in relationships, we've said that actually there's a vital link there. There's a really vital link in the fact that actually confidence in relationships and having that there, that's pivotal in actually making that relationship work. So for me, I think one of the things with, and Sian, you've just said it, is about building that trust. So having that confidence in your own ability builds that trust, particularly with maybe the planners you're working with, much more quickly. And actually having confidence, and we'll talk about this when we talk about challenging a little bit later on, but having confidence to be assertive and to challenge a planner as well, if you're in that role, again, indicates that you know your stuff. So if you know your stuff well enough and you're confident enough to actually go, this isn't quite right, and actually raise it with a planner that you're working with, although no one particularly likes to be challenged, what it does indicate is you know your stuff. And actually suddenly a planner goes, oh, okay, yeah, I didn't think about that. Brilliant. That's, yeah, thank you for raising it. So I think that's really important. And then I think in terms of challenging, this is probably a really good place where maybe if you're not a paraplanner already, actually, this is probably a really good thing to start to think about, because actually there will be times in the career as a paraplanner, and those of you who are paraplanners already know this, where you will have to challenge, and you'll have to challenge the planners that you work with. And it's about thinking about how do you do that in a positive way. Now, the next 4 slides, I'm just going to go through actually how we can try and do that in a positive way. Actually, what I would say for those of you who are not paraplanners yet, this actually might be really useful stuff to almost take away and think about if you do end up having an interview for a paraplanning role or a trainee paraplanner role, because these are some great examples of some of the challenges that you will come up against if you're in that role. So I think if you're not in that role yet, this is probably a great 4 slides to just make notes on, because they'll be really useful going forward in that career journey. So let's start with number 1 then, how to challenge in a positive way. So firstly, it sounds really simple, but build relationships with the person in question. So it's much easier to challenge someone and to be assertive with someone who you've got quite a good relationship with. So firstly, understand and agree how you're going to work together. So if you're working with a new planner, have that conversation. Just talk about, right, how are we going to work together? What does this look like? And agree it. And then get to know each other. And it might sound really basic, but as I say, if you've got a nice relationship with someone, it's much easier to challenge them. So actually take the time to get to know each other. And it doesn't just have to be all about work. Find out about them as a person. People love being asked about themselves, so find out about them as a person. And actually, Sian, you made the really good suggestion as well the other day of tell them about yourself as well. Maybe if you're not comfortable or you're not confident enough to be someone who just starts asking, someone you barely know all about their life. Well, maybe just start to drop little things in conversation about maybe what you did at the weekend, and almost just kick off that relationship building to start to get to know each other a little bit more. And then I think try to understand the personality type. And I'm going to park that one there because we're going to briefly talk about this a little bit later on. But I think that's a really good tip, and when we get to it and a bit later on, you'll see why. But try to understand the personality type. And then lastly, in terms of this building relationships, this again might seem like a really basic tip, but it gets missed so often. If you're not office based, or you're not in the same location as the person you're working with or people you're working with, try and use things like video calls, or at the very least voice calls, on a frequent basis, so you actually get to see each other and you actually get to verbally speak to each other. Avoid having all your communication via email, because it's actually really, really hard to build relationships over email, and it's really easy actually to misinterpret as well, isn't it, over email, whether it be tone or what someone's trying to say. So for me, if you do have planners who you work with closely, or whatever role you're in and you've got someone you work closely with, try and build that relationship through things like video calls if you're not face to face, and it really does help. And then number 2, in terms of how to challenge in a positive way, let's start to think about, okay, we've built a good relationship with someone, something's come up and we need to challenge. So we need to be assertive and we need to ask the question. So firstly, I think key thing is no one likes to feel attacked, do they? No one likes to feel like they've done something wrong. So when it comes to challenging in a positive way, it's about how do we phrase some of these questions to the person in question. So actually it's a bit more comfortable for them. And I've come up with some examples here that you might want to use. So things like, I don't know, say we've got a fact find with not enough information in and we need to challenge. So we can say things like, can I just play devil's advocate for a minute here? Or you can say something like, do you mind if I just challenge something here? Or one that I quite like is, can I just bring another idea into the mix? And then there's a couple of others on there, which is things like, well, maybe is there another angle we can consider here? Or I use this one quite a lot as well. I think I've got a different perspective on this. And then you say that to someone and they'll go, right, okay, well, tell me, or, oh, okay, what's that different perspective? Or if you say something like, can I play devil's advocate for a minute here? And the planner will go, yeah, of course. Actually, what they're doing there, and it's quite clever actually, because it's just a slight tweak and it's a psychological thing. But what you're doing is you're actually getting the planner to welcome your challenge. So you're actually opening up to them and getting them to say, yes, okay, I'll welcome the challenge. And it sounds really basic, but just by asking that question in that way, just changes it slightly. So it doesn't feel like an attack, but it feels like, actually, do you mind if I say something? Do you mind if I raise this? And the planner goes, yes. And then you can do it. So I think it's thinking about that way of actually, how do you raise those kinds of challenges in a way that actually the planner welcomes that opinion. So I think they're quite useful phrases to use, and you're probably looking at some of those thinking, oh, I do that already. And I know Sean and Chloe, you both said when we were going through those, oh yeah, I use that one. Sometimes you might use those without even realising you've done it that way. But I think if you don't do it that way, there's some really nice phrases to just open up that challenge. And then if we move on to number 3, I think this is a really important one as well. Just knowing why the issue is an issue, and then being able to communicate that effectively. So that comes back to having that confidence of knowing your stuff and the self-belief. So if you're going to raise something with a planner as an issue, understand yourself, why it's an issue, what it means, and actually be able to communicate that to them. So classic example, I used to do loads of file checks actually of planners' work. And one of the things I'd often have to raise is things like, you've done some really poor fact finding. And if you're not a paraplanner yet, this is the joys that you've got to look forward to. You will come across them. But actually, you'd have to raise that with them. And one of the things I always use is the reason why it's an issue. And for me, when I was talking to planners, it's about going, well, actually, you'd never be able to defend a complaint if this isn't on the file. I know you know it, or it's not on the file, and this is why it's a problem. And it's almost then just giving them that different mindset that I'm not attacking you or saying you don't know what you're doing, but actually this is why it's a problem and why we need to raise it. So whatever it might be, whatever the challenge is, it's having, again, that confidence that you understand why it's a problem, not just that it's a problem. And then the last one on there is actually trying to think about, if you are going to present a problem, make sure you present a solution as well wherever you can, because there's no point just identifying a problem without knowing how we fix it, or at least having an idea of how we fix it. So again, bring a solution to the table, have confidence in your solution, so know that it's the right thing to do. So again, make sure you know your stuff if you're going to bring a solution to the table. And again, particularly if you're in a paraplanning role and it's maybe something where you've got to go back to a client. No one likes to go back to a client. No one likes to look silly in front of a client. So when we're looking at solutions, maybe think about, okay, will this mean the planner looks a bit silly? And if it does, what's the best way to deal with that? How can we deal with that? Can I go back to a client instead of asking the planner to go back to the client? So it's almost thinking about, okay, how do we reduce the negative impact of this? And again, that then gets the person on board that you're challenging. Okay, so conscious of time, I know I had 15 minutes and I've probably gone over a little bit, but I think you're expecting that, Sean. You know what I'm like. I think, should we do with a confidence exercise now, which is actually all about challenging positively. So those of you who are mentors, you know that we've done this. I did send out 2 examples actually of situations where potentially we might need to challenge a planner. And what I would love us to do now is just spend some time just actually talking about real life, how you do that. And I think that'll be really useful actually for those of you maybe who aren't paraplanners yet, actually just sit back and listen to actually how some people would challenge on these. So if you are a mentor, then if you pop your cameras on and I'll know who to pick on, or actually Sean, I might leave it up to you because I don't want to pick on someone who shouldn't be picked on, and awful. I can see people like desperately turning the cameras off as well. Don't pick on me. So I think, should we start with case 1? So I'll talk through it, and then Sean, if you want to pick on some of the mentors too. It sounds awful, doesn't it? Not pick on you, but ask you to contribute, and then we'll go from there. So I think case 1 then, it was a case where there was a couple aged 63 and 59. They were looking to retire in the next 6 months. They had about 800 grand in pensions, about 450 grand in investments, about 100 grand in savings. And on the file that landed on the paraplanner's desk, the objective of that client simply said the client wants to simplify arrangements and access the pensions flexibly. Now, those of you who are paraplanners will be looking at that going, right, okay, that's not good enough. Those of you who are not paraplanners, you might be looking at that thinking, I don't know if that's good enough or not, but actually it's not. So the answer is it's not good enough. The issue with that was that actually that as a client objective was just not really an objective, but it was a solution. What we really needed to see is, why does the client want to simplify their arrangements? Why do they want to access the pensions flexibly? What do they want to do with all this money? All the really good stuff. We'd want to just understand a bit more, actually, what is it the client really wants to do? So my question here is not about actually why is any of that wrong, but it's more around actually, how would we raise this with a planner? So if that landed on your desk and you were like, right, okay, this just isn't good enough, what would you do? How would you raise that? How would you challenge that planner? So over to you, Sean. I'll let you pick some of the mentors out.
Very good question, Carla. Because you're top of my screen, I'm going to go to you, Lisa, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
You must have had lots of experience of challenging. So what sort of things would you do in this situation?
So I think in the first instance, I'd ask to have a chat to the planner. So ideally, sit down face to face with them via Teams, something where you can actually, see each other and have a proper chat about it. And then I'd really just ask them to talk me through the clients. So what does retirement look like for these clients? What is it that they would like to do? What are their hobbies? What are their plans? What are their future hopes and dreams, so to speak? And then that's the starting point for really understanding what they want the future to look like, what they need to make that happen, and then the advice kind of flows naturally from there.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think you're also identifying in this that there's a gap in the process at some point. So that might need to be dealt with either at a firm level or just for that individual planner. But the planner is telling you things that's not on the file, which is an issue. So we need to find a way to get that stuff onto a file, which is an issue in itself as well. So perfect. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks.
Sarah, can I go to you? Our Paraplanner of the Year.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yes, I'd be sort of similar to Lisa, I think. I think for me, in my experience, challenging advisors on objectives definitely seems to be one of the trickiest areas. I find it's one of the areas they definitely get the most defensive about, and don't like being told that they've done it wrong. So I think you have to do it quite carefully. I think for me, with a lot of advisors, you do find they know the stuff, it's in their head, they just haven't put it down somewhere, especially if they've got a long-term relationship with that client, they know it. So I think, like Lisa said, it was just sitting down with them or having a Teams with them and then sort of just probing the advisor as to why. So, they said they want to consolidate it. Why do they want to consolidate it? Why is it important to them? What are their plans? They're about to retire. What are their plans? Do they want to go traveling? Are they going to spend more time with their family? They're going to actually fully retire? They're planning on doing more work? So it's just that sort of probing of the advisor. And I think, like Sian said, if it's an issue that keeps happening, there is obviously a training need. But I also think if you do have a relationship with that advisor, also ask, can I attend some of the meetings? And then you can take down the soft facts and you can probe the client as well. Because if it is being missed and they're not doing it, maybe they do just need someone else in their probing as well.
Absolutely.
I love that, Sarah. Sorry, Sian, I was just going to pick up on one of the things Sarah said there because I think it's so important, is the bit you started out by saying the advisor probably knows all this stuff. And that's usually the case, isn't it? I think we all typically find that in most cases, they can answer most of the questions that you have. They're just really bad at putting it down on paper or in the file notes. And
absolutely.
I think that's a really good place to start, though, when you're challenging them is, and I did this with file reviews. I used to start with that opener, which is, you probably know the answer to this, but it's not on the file. So I know it's in your head. Let's get it out your head and let's get it onto the file. So I think that's a really good point, Sarah.
Exactly. And another way that I found to really be able to, or give advisors the tools to answer, give them the answers that you want, or change the process, is to introduce things like you could use dictation. I know that as an advisor or a financial planner, you're not going to necessarily like to sit there and type out notes for an hour. So there needs to be another method of getting that information from their head onto the file somehow. So I found dictation has really helped with that, because in the sort of way of having client meetings, they'd go out to a client meeting, they'd probably be in the car or on the way home, and they can just set dictation on, and it can and they can talk to the phone all the way home and tell them the file all about the client, which has worked really quite nicely. And probably the only other tip that I would add to this as well is, absolutely speaking to the financial planner face to face, whether that's through Teams or literally in the office, is great. But make sure before you've even raised any of the questions with the financial planner that you've made a list of those questions that you've got, so that you can, as soon as the advisor says that they are ready to talk about it, you've got that list to go to, and you're not scrambling around thinking, oh, what did I need to talk about? So you've got that really clear, I need answers to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and this is kind of what I'm thinking about them, because then you don't have to, you can concentrate completely on how you're going to have that conversation with the financial planner, rather than what you actually need to talk about, which then really helps build the relationship. Anyway, that's enough of me talking.
Who next? Have we got anyone else, Sian, for case 1?
Does anyone else want to chip in?
Can I just add a little something to what you were saying? I think what you and Carla were saying about sort of processes and looking at that is really, really important, because you've identified, you know, a potential problem here, and actually if you can get a solution to that sort of moving forward, it saves you having to keep sort of tackling advisors like this. So, you know, we've kind of introduced a couple of things, like always having a catch-up meeting between the planner and the paraplanner sort of immediately after the client meeting, which gives the paraplanner the opportunity to get out of the advisor everything that's happened and make sure that it is all written down. And also we've kind of sort of sat down together and designed some meeting notes which make sure that we're picking up some of those key things. So what is it that the client wants to do in retirement? What does that look like? That type of thing. So you're not so reliant on the advisor, the planner, remembering to put it down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point, Lisa. Absolutely. Okay, any more from the mentors? Does anyone else want to chip in?
I was just going to build a little bit on just what Sian was saying about making a list of what you want to talk about. I find as well making a list of everything, so even not just stopping at the objectives, looking at the whole file and making a list of any queries, because it saves you going back and forth to the advisor as well about 10 times, which just gets their back up, gets them annoyed, like, oh god, not another question, you know.
Yeah.
So I always find that useful as well.
Absolutely, and also don't be scared of creating your own template that you will use on each case for you know, at your starting point, to make sure that all of those things are complete and you've got all of the information that you need before starting. I certainly know that, you know, that's a really good tactic to have, certainly at the earlier part of your career, before you've got kind of the process in your head about how you're going to do things. It makes you do things in a really consistent way, and like Sarah said, stops you having to go back to the advisor over and over again, because that really annoys them. They'd rather you just ask them straight up and give you you know, half an hour of their time in one go, rather than 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there, because they can see that you can piece things together a lot more as well, which is better for everyone.
Absolutely. And I think, do you know what, that's a really good point, Lisa and Sian, as well, because it goes back to that point, doesn't it, about where we said actually agree how you're going to work together at outset. And I think if you can agree that, and particularly as you say, Sian, if you've got that nice template that you're going to work to, show the planner that, say this is what I do, this is how I work. And then they'll expect it as well, so they know what to expect. They know you're going to come with questions, but as you say, we can limit the amount of questions, or limit the amount of times we're going back with questions. I think is really important. Absolutely. Okay, any more before we move on to the second one? No. Oh yeah,
Maddie. You're on mute, Maddie.
Come on now.
There you are.
Okay, right. I was just going to say a couple of things. My situation is quite different. I work with lots of different advisors remotely, but one trick I always find works is that you're on their side, and that compliance are the baddie, and me and you are going to try and get this case through. But in order to do that, I need X, Y, and Z. So it's almost like you're on their side. You're not working against them. And sometimes I find with a particularly in-depth or difficult case, the advisor will speak to me before a follow-up meeting and say, what do you need me to find out? What do you need so that I can put, so you can put it in your report? And I say, well, it would be really great if I had quotes that respond to this question and that question and that question. And that's absolutely great, when they do that. If you can catch them sometimes before the meeting and not just on the back of the meeting, that's I find that's when the best reports are written.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, actually, I love a couple of ideas there. I love that one about actually let's team up against compliance. I'm not the baddie, they are. I like that. That's a great idea. But I love that idea as well. The second idea you've got about actually that bit about this is what I need from you. And actually, Maddie, the fact that your planners say that to you, what do you need from me? That is such a sign of trust, isn't it? That they've got that confidence in your ability. So actually, I think that's a great sign that you're in a really good place with your planners, that they trust and they believe in what you do and your ability. And I think it's fantastic being able to get to that place. And it's a good, actually, that's a really good point, because what you do with your planners and that bit, well, before your follow-up meeting, we need this, this and this. Again, if you don't do that with your planners at the moment, maybe that's something you can introduce and have a conversation about, to say, okay, can we do some prep work before your meetings with the clients? And I'll give you a list of the things that we need for the report, so we don't have to go back to the client. So I think that's a really good idea, actually, Maddie, how you guys do that. Absolutely.
And also, it's just leading on to that whole the view that I've certainly got about financial planners and paraplanners. We, you know, working on the same level as each other, not for one another.
Yeah.
It just creates such a great relationship. But it does mean that you have to be confident, and you have to deal with that relationship a little bit differently than if you are in a relationship where you are working for somebody and you've very much got that relationship. It does change things quite a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Sean. I think as well, maybe this is slightly controversial, but I'm going to say it. When I look at files and I look at advice that is being given, I don't just hold planners accountable. I always say it's the planner and the paraplanner who's accountable for this file. And if there's something wrong on that file, you both have been all over that file and all over that advice. So you're both accountable for any failings. And
Absolutely.
I think that's really a really important message as well. That actually, as you say, Sean, you're a team. It's not one person working for the other. You're a team. And it's getting to that point of being a team.
And I'm sure this will come up in the next case study that we've got as well. But, you know, the thing that you touched on there, Maddie, client's own words, like it's you know, it's the basics of financial planning, but these don't seem to make it onto the file unless you specifically talk about it. But getting your client's own words, especially about objectives, that's all you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know, really quick example, I was on a call last night about ESG. So all the, if you don't know what ESG is, all to do with sustainable investing and all the environmental stuff. And there was a planner on the call who said, oh, I do triage with my clients to see whether they're interested or not. And it's basically just a tick box to go, do you want a bit of ESG or don't you? And then he said, and then the client will say to me, I don't want ESG. And he said all of this amazing, brilliant stuff. And I said, you put that on the file. Oh, no, we just do this tick box. And I'm like, well, you want all that really good stuff that the client told you afterwards about why they don't or they do want to invest in a certain way. And it's just, yeah. And if you don't work with planners at the minute, it'll blow your mind when you do, because this is what happens. They know all this really good stuff, but they never write it down. So that comes back to your point, Sean, about dictation and all that kind of thing. There's better ways to do it. Anyway, I could talk about that forever. So should we move on to case study number 2 whilst we've still got time? So number 2 then, a little bit different. An older couple, 75 and 79, they've got grown-up children, they've got about 500k in pensions, about 600k in investments, about 350 in cash, and then they've got some secure income which is meeting their outgoings. And planner went to see them, said, right, okay, these two want to top up their ISAs because they want to get a better return than cash. And that's it. That's what the client wants to do. They want a better return than cash. Issue with that, because again, this isn't really about what the issue is, it's about how we deal with it. But the issue with that is actually that's just a bit generic. It's a bit objective. The objective's a bit generic. We don't have enough meat on the bones there. And it comes back to the point, Sean, you just made, is we would love to have the client's own words here. What are they wanting to do with all of that money? Exactly what is it? What do they want? What are they trying to achieve? Where's the money going to go? They're getting older now. There's no chance they're going to spend all of that before they go. So where's it going? What do they want to do with it? So again, same question as before. Bearing all of this in mind, how do we raise this with a financial planner? Because this is a really common objective, isn't it? I see this all the time on files. How do you raise that with a planner to go, that's just not good enough? So again, open to the floor.
Let's go to some people that we haven't heard from, if that's okay. So I can see Reese and Alex both sitting there. So Alex, do you fancy chipping in on that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would probably, much like Lisa and Sarah and Maddie have already said, I would generally have like a meeting with the planner, with the financial advisor, like before kind of writing any report or anything like that, to kind of try and tease out what the objective is, and yeah, kind of try and understand why they've written that, because like we said, it's it's not an objective, and yeah, what do they want to do, and why, really, trying to get that what and why out of the planner, as no doubt they've discussed it with the client, and yeah, there's probably a better objective than that.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily about what is the objective in this particular case. What's the objective for this report? It's not really that we're after. It's what is the client's objective? What does the client want their money to do for them? And if they can answer that question, that's the objective, and you can use that objective then for pretty much most advice that's given.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just to say on that, it's sometimes you get too bogged down in this one. Is like based on a topping up an ISA. It's not necessarily worrying, like an objective doesn't have to necessarily be the investment recommendation or the pension recommendation, like Sian said. It's all, yeah, how does this tie into their financial planning, really? What are their financial planning objectives?
Absolutely. It's a really good point, actually, that Alex, that it doesn't have to be a solution, because we see so many objectives that are just solutions, and you go, wait, that's not an objective, that's a solution. So you'll often see objectives that say transfer your or consolidate your pensions, or take tax-free cash, or top up your ISA, and you're like, wait, that's the solution. That's why do they want to do that bit? It's not the bit they're doing, but it's the why, as you rightly say. Is that how does it tie into the financial plan? Absolutely.
And even on top of that as well, you know, I've seen ones where it doesn't say the objective is to take out the tax-free cash, but it's gone a bit deeper than that and said the client wants to purchase a new rental property. So the question is, why do they want to purchase a new rental property? What is it about that they want to achieve? What is that going to do for them? Why are they doing that? What's the emotion behind it, and the logistics and everything else? Because the financial planners, they will have pushed their client to answer those questions, but we just need to know the answers to those.
Absolutely.
What's the question on the first domino that falls, and then the rest of it also like comes from that? Can you roll it back and tell me? I'm not mute, am I? No. Can you roll it back and tell me? You know how did this start? And there's, keep going back and keep going back and keep going back until you've got the first question where everything just flows from that.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because actually, let's think about this. So I'm going to pick on you, Maddie. I'm really sorry, but if the planner, only because you've got loads of good experience with good planners by the sound of it, but if they say to you, "Oh, why do you keep asking me all? Why are you asking me all this?" How do you go back to them with that? Because I think that's the problem, isn't it? They get a bit fed up. They go, "Oh, why do you need all this?" How do we deal with that bit?
Just say, I need it so I can knit you a really good report. I can't do it without that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I like that. That's a really good response, actually. So we can do a really good report. Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's the key, isn't it? It's great that we can go, right, we need all of this. I need X, Y, and Z. But it comes back to that why. Why do we need it? Because we need to make sure that this report is watertight. So compliance don't come back and beat us with a big stick or whatever it might be.
Or worse, the FCA.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. Or do you know what, actually, my favourite, I normally say forget the FCA, because it's hard, it's very unlikely they'll ever look at your suitability reports if you're a decent firm. It's the Ombudsman. That's the one that I always use. Yeah, it's the false complaints. If they said around, actually, this is probably the strongest thing you can use when you're talking about why you need a good report. But I always used to say to planners, if you ever need to defend a complaint and you can't because your report and your file's not good enough, how annoyed would you be when you know this advice is right for the client? And I think that's a really strong one to use, because it's about going, this isn't for the FCA, it's not even for compliance, but this is to make sure that you can defend your advice that is absolutely right for this client, and the FOS can't pick it apart. That's the key thing for me. And usually that works. Usually they go, oh yeah, put it in the report. So normally it works.
Thanks, Carla. As a final go-to, I'm just going to go to Reese very quickly. We've just got a few minutes left, just to see whether you've got anything to add to how you might deal with this, Reese.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at a slight disadvantage because I'm compliance assistant as well, so I can't go, let's team up against compliance. Yeah, which puts me a little, yeah. But one thing that I try and do, I mean, I think we've all kind of agreed the best way, but one of the ways to do it is to say, can we just have a meeting? I just want to understand this a little bit more. But I've created a template here for all of the advisors to fill in, which should cover the why. And if it doesn't, I'll sit with them and I'll have the meeting. But then as we walk away, I'll ask them to fill in the template. Because what I'm finding is that if they have to do an extra bit of work, the other thing that I will say as well is when I'm setting the appointment up to speak to them is before I start this report. Because I've found that that's a way of kind of triggering an action from the advisor or the planner. Because if they think, okay, he's not even going to start that report, I'm not going to get this business and I want to book them in next week. If they've got that in their mind, then it's, normally I can get appointments done fairly quickly. But then after the meeting, I'll ask them to fill in the template for me. Because if they have to do additional work and they have to do it a couple of times, it's amazing how quickly that becomes a habit for them because they don't want the hassle from me. But to go back to what Maddie was saying, why do I need all this? Why do I need all this? You've got kind of all the cards if you're writing the report. Because if I can't do this bit, I can't write this report, I can't get that illustration, I can't do this. If there's a wall there that they're fully responsible for getting past, as a motivator for them, it's brilliant. But also to go back to the confidence thing, it is another show that you know your stuff. You know that for this to happen, for you to be able to do your job, you're confident enough to sit there and say to them, I can't do my job for you or with you until you've done this bit. Yeah. And it does start to build up for them a bit more kind of respect for not only you, but for what you do, your part in the process. Absolutely, Reese, I couldn't agree more with that bit. Actually, I love that last bit you've just said about actually it builds up that respect, not just for the job, but what you do in the process as well, and the importance of it. I think absolutely having that challenge and actually sitting there and going, I can't do this bit until you give me proper information, absolutely builds that confidence in you and your ability. I really, really like that. And the other thing, actually, I'm going to add it to my list that you said there, Reese, was that bit about I can't start my report until. I'm going to add that to that list of good phrases you can use with planners, because I love that. I think that's so powerful. Actually, not even that, let's play devil's advocate, but I can't start my report until X, Y, Z. I think, yeah, suddenly they're like, okay, what do you need? What do you need? That's fab. Thank you, Reese. Some really good points there. Okay, Sean, I know we've got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to pass back over to you to do your bit.
Great, thanks very much, Carla. No, that's really really useful, and I couldn't agree more with all of those the comments there. Some really useful tips that have helped me in what I've been doing over the years as well. So Carla touched on this earlier about using when building relationships and using personality tests to help in making that happen. It can really help in understanding each other, and for me, I've certainly seen that work in reality, and hopefully anybody else who's gone through a sort of understanding personality testing within their firm, they hopefully will have seen the benefits of that. I know that I've done that a couple of times in firms that I've worked in, and it's really interesting, especially where it's done at a firm level. Everyone in the firm is involved, and you're in the same room, and there's standing up and being really honest and open about who is what personality type. You really get an alignment of groups together, and you quite often find the people that are doing the same job, paraplanners or administrators or financial planners, they tend to come out with very similar personality types, and that then just confirms that, for me anyway, being a paraplanner, there's a certain personality type that's attracted to that kind of role. Same with financial planners, a certain personality type is attracted to that kind of role, because they are fundamentally different. It's not about one role being better than another. It's just very different, and very different people are attracted to them, and it can really help from a good understanding, especially if someone's come in say as a financial planner, they might never have worked as a paraplanner or an administrator, so they don't understand necessarily how the role works, but they don't understand that actually there's a huge personality difference, and that's a key thing that they need to understand. So there's a lot of learning that can go on there. But all I really wanted to say was everyone should start by just completing your own personality test and analysing the results. And I'm just going to put the link to the personality test that I've used before in the chat here. And I'll also add the link onto our group as well. This is one that I've used. It's a free one. It gives you I think quite nice results. You won't necessarily agree with the results. They might not be accurate, or they might be 100% accurate. And you might just need to go on a bit of a self-discovery journey to really find out whether that is really you or not, because it might be not your opinion of you, but it might actually be you. And then the next stage for me would be very much getting other people to complete that test as well. It might be the person that sits next to you as a starting point, then maybe your paraplanning team that you work with or administrators that you work with. And then if you feel really brave and you've really built up your confidence, moving on to getting the whole firm or financial planners that you work with to complete it as well. It's just such a great learning journey and you will not regret it.
Absolutely. Can I give an example, Sian? Because we actively do this in Progeny. Everyone's everyone at a certain levels had to go through this personality testing, and I loved it, to be honest. Thought it was fantastic. But one of the places it's become really useful for me is understanding my colleagues' personality types, because one of the things that when you do these kinds of testings it brings up is things like whether someone's a almost like a big sky thinker or a long-term thinker versus the detail. And I'm a detail person. I love a plan and detail, and I love lists and all that kind of stuff, where actually my boss, I found out, loves big sky thinking, and he just loves the end point and what's the end point we're going to get to. And that's really helped in understanding actually how we work together, because I know that he'll just switch off if I start just waffling on about the detail, which is what I want to do because that's what I'm like. So I think it's great actually understanding the people you work with, because suddenly you go, right, okay, if I've got an idea or I need to talk to someone about something, I know what they're like. So actually, instead of getting caught up in the detail, I need to focus a bit more on the end point to get them engaged in and bought into what we're talking about. So yeah, it's really good when you get into it. You can start to really analyze other people and go, okay, how do I talk to you? So it's good, yeah.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much, Carla, for joining us today. I hope you've found that really useful, everyone that's joined in today. And thank you to our mentors for also participating and sharing your experiences. And I hope that everyone finds that really useful. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thanks for everyone for watching. And hope you can join us for the next one. Thanks, everyone.